We'll call this regular city council meeting to order on Monday, September 16th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Present.
Mr. Bateman?
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Welch?
Present.
Mr. Parrott?
Present.
Mr. Downs?
Present.
Mr. Keller?
Present.
Mr. Haneke?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have anyone that would like to speak under public participation? Okay. Moving down to the consent agenda, we have the payment of bills, approval of minutes August 13th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting, September 3rd, 2019 regular City Council meeting, and September 10th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting. The oral proclamation requested by the Lincoln chapter of the DAR commemorating the drafting of the Constitution and proclaiming the week of September 17th through September 23rd, 2019 as Constitution Week, as well as a request from Lincoln Community High School Football Boosters Club to permit whitewashing of Wyatt Avenue from South Kickapoo Street to Lincoln Community High School and the streets in front of the home of senior players on Wednesday, September 18th, 2019, and Thursday, September 19th, 2019 for homecoming festivities.
Motion to approve. Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Under ordinances resolutions, we have the resolution permitting adult use marijuana dispensary to open and operate within the city of Lincoln.
Make that motion. Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. Discussion? Mr. Parrott?
Just a few things. Last week, we had Allison speak in regards to, I think, this topic somewhat, and she spoke about community. And what I took away from that, I don't know what the rest of the council took away from that, but basically, I took away from it is what do we want in our community? How are we going to grow our community? A family structure, a family-friendly atmosphere. And the way that I took her comments was that perhaps having a legalized dispensary for marijuana is something that the city should not do. That's what I took away from it. I was hoping, and probably I didn't make it clear enough, to have Logan County, an individual from Logan County Health Department, Mental Health, speak in regards to marijuana and its use, the detriments, the advantages of it. The lady that spoke, I'm trying to remember her name now.
Kelly Crook.
Kelly, thank you. When she was speaking of some positive outcomes from marijuana, she was speaking of patients of hers, not hers, but some individuals that she was working with that were on medical marijuana, and it was the benefits, not recreational benefits. In addition, I think that we had a governor signed the legalization of marijuana, which doesn't make it morally right. And in fact, I think if you would have been asked 10 years ago if we would ever allow it into our city, I think we would have said no. I think Lincoln traditionally is a conservative town, Republican, and I don't think this is conservative values. I think a yes vote you will have to answer for at some point, and I hope the council takes that in consideration.
Ms. Horn?
I agree with Steve, and I have had an awful lot of calls and people coming up to me and talking to me. And for medical marijuana, I don't see any problem with, but recreational, I don't agree with.
Mr. Welch?
So, my position on this is, the question before us is not whether we want marijuana in our community. It's already here. The governor's already decided, and our legislators, that we will allow it into the community. And so the question now becomes the increased law enforcement perspective, the costs that are associated with that, and if this recreational product is going to make it into the community, how we govern it. I'm voting yes tonight because I think that the city needs to have some say-so in how it's sold, if and when it gets here. And that is another part. There's no guarantee that the city is going to see one. It just creates the possibility. But by being able to govern it, we can keep it away from things like schools, churches, limit the number of them that there are in the community, and put some rigor around it. So I know there's some people that don't see that side of the discussion, but if it's going to be here, I think we need to be able to regulate it.
Further discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
No.
Mrs. Horn?
No.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
4-4 tie.
Yes. Moving down, we have the ordinance adding Title 13, Chapter 2, imposing a municipal cannabis retail occupation tax.
Make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion, Mr. Welch seconded. Discussion? Kevin?
So this is for the city attorney. Are we voting yes that we're going to tax it? Or do we have to set the parameters tonight, as in percentage, where that tax money would go to? Or is that something we could do at a later date? And the reason I'm asking that is, if we're going to tax it, I don't want it to be like the utility tax, where it was forced on the people, and then with the promise of it was going to go to the pensions, and less than 10% of it goes to pensions. If we're going to make real use of it, I'm probably off on the 10%,
It's 30.
30%.
Three-way. It was split three-way.
Almost half.
It was split three-way.
But it was sold to us that it was going to pay down the pensions, and then they split it off. I would like the money to go to specific needs for a specific place where it should go, not just go into a general fund where we can all just dip our spoon in it and act like it's just anybody's money.
Mr. Hoblet?
As I indicated, I believe, before the meeting, there was Mr. Honecki, he had a question last week, and I tried to answer his question. There are several questions, actually. In regards to the deviation, in regards to the 3% that would take out here, I'm still not apprised as to essentially what all those breakdowns would be. I would have to think that it's probably ruled by a state statute at this juncture. Now, as I previously mentioned, I think, or as I maybe mentioned before via email, right now there is a bit of a kerfuffle in association with the state statute as it's currently written. There's expected to be an amendment that would essentially rectify the percentages in regards to the as to where the money will be going and as to when the tax can take into effect. That would be, the idea is that it's supposed to be taking into effect January 1st, not September 1st. So that fix needs to happen first on the state level. But it's being encouraged that any municipality or any county that's looking to have this effective January 1st to go ahead and pass and submit off by October 1st or September 30th at the latest. Their inclination that they're going to tax at the 3%, because if you don't, we have to wait until the next session for it to go through. So essentially, if you install a recreational marijuana facility and you don't make the requisite deadline, and I can't speak as to why that deadline was put in place, but it's there. But if we don't meet that deadline, then you could potentially run into a situation where a recreational facility is being sold, or marijuana is being sold and not taxed at the municipal level, which kind of defeats the purpose of a municipality desiring to put a recreational facility in. And we could speak as to the realities as to whether or not a business can be fully functional and open and ready to go within 3 to 4 months of January 1st for this to go into effect, there's certain realities for that, but essentially, if not here, then there needs to be a special meeting of some sort if the council wishes to further discuss it before the October 1st date, or essentially waive it and not open a facility potentially January 1st or wait till later on.
Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. And, thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for the clarification on that. And I did want to add that I have looked at what some of the other cities are doing, and they're talking about doing exactly what Alderman Bateman indicated, which was to specify what they want to use it for. And in many cases, it's pensions, because virtually every municipality and county in the state has a pension deficit to deal with, and so that's been a common use of it. That would be up to the council if that's how they wanted to use it, but it would seem to me that this ordinance specifies a 3%. You could, and Mr. City Attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, the council could vote to authorize that 3% tax tonight and then later decide how they want to apply the proceeds of that, or where they want to allocate those.
That is correct, Mr. Conzo. The only thing that needs to be done at this stage is to indicate to the state of Illinois that we are actually going to be taxing and what level we're going to be taxing at. The tax is the 3% that the city's desiring, if they pass it, 3%, and that's the only inclination that needs to be made, is essentially to the state at this juncture. Keep in mind, we guys just narrowly passed a resolution in association with this. There still needs to be an ordinance, okay, in regards to recreational marijuana. And so that needs to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals as to how they're going to zone this. It needs to come back for approval. There needs to be it needs to be worked out as to whether that's going to be regulations as to how many feet a recreational marijuana facility can be close to a school. Okay, that's just one example. Some municipalities decide that they don't want it, like they want it, for example, like 1,500 feet. They don't want it within 1,500 feet of a school. Okay, there are state statutes that indicate that are already in place. For example, if we're using the 1,500 feet, there are state statutes that one recreational marijuana facility cannot be within 1,500 feet of another recreational marijuana facility. So we will have to adhere by, obviously, and probably incorporate those into our ordinance, but and I can essentially provide a template, as essentially what we're kind of looking at here, and essentially leave the council to discuss and decide as to how they would want to do things. But keep in mind, we're really at the beginning phases here for this. So by no means is everything set in stone, I would say, at this juncture.
Mr. Keller?
Thank you, Mayor. So just again, as a repeat, so October 1st is the time the state needs to know if we are imposing a tax, and what is the deadline that we need to specify and delineate how this money is allocated?
I'm only aware of the deadline in regards to October 1st for if we're going to be taxing at 3% effective January 1st, 2020.
Gotcha. Thank you.
For discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
No.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
No.
Mrs. Horn?
No.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
No.
4-4.
Yes. Moving down to bids, we have the approval of bids from Stark Excavation for Union Street Pump Station construction in an amount not to exceed $3,429,900.
Make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion, Mr. Parrott seconded. Discussion? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
The reports, Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. You've all received written copies of this report, except for Alderman Bateman, who's received his electronically. I have extra copies for anybody who may want them. General fund balance, you see there, $2,406,000 plus. It's, considerably higher than it was last month. Reason for that is we've got another distribution of the property tax from the Logan County Treasurer's Office. And she has been processing these really ahead of where we would have expected. They've been coming to us very promptly as they've been collected. We'll get another when we do we've already received one for September. It's not reflected in this report. This report is as of the end of August, but we did receive a distribution this month as well. We'll receive a smaller one in October and then the final one in November, which is generally much smaller. Position of this account, the composite account in general, and the other ones, you'll see the details attached to that. A lot of that is, of course, in the sewer fund, and that's in anticipation of a lot of the work which is going to be done, some of which you just authorized here with your vote a few minutes ago. And so we're looking forward to the timely completion of that. The two attachments, I didn't print as many as usual because I think you probably get tired of seeing the same ones every month, and there's probably not a need to go through every revenue stream every month, but I did want to include two of them. One of them is the video gaming tax receipts, and you can see we're ahead of where we were last year at this time by about $21,000 at $165,385.97. Our projection, or when I did these revenue projections at the beginning of near the end of the last fiscal year for this fiscal year, included in your budget documents, projected that at $290,000, which would have been about an $8,000 increase of what we received during the last fiscal year, which was $282,703. I think we're going to beat that. I don't know by how much, but if that trend, you can see it's up. It's not up by a huge amount, but it is up over last year. So I think we'll beat that projection. Saying that, this is January through June of the current calendar year, not the fiscal year. We're only 4 months into the fiscal year. And then the utility tax. Now, news on this one isn't so good, and that's why I wanted to share this with you. You see, there are $50,000 in May, as opposed to $63,494 May of 2018. $51,000 in June, as opposed to just over $70,000 June of last year. So down $13,000 in May, and then $19,000 in June. In July, we dropped from $78,233 a year ago to $57,125. So it's a drop of $19,000. I think there are some reasons for this. The summer has been milder than last summer. Last summer, at least around here, was very hot. I guess in some parts of the country it's been exceptionally hot this year, but it really hasn't been here, and I think the mild weather has contributed to that. But I don't think that's all of it. I think a good part of this is you're starting to see the effects of the closing of the glass factory and the closing of the Kroger. I have no idea what Kroger's utility bill was because we're not privy to that. Alderman Horn, I don't know if you're at liberty to tell us that, but
So I can't tell you that.
Okay, that's all right. I didn't think you could, but I thought I'd ask. I'm sure it was substantial, a store that size with refrigerators and coolers and freezers and not to
And we're
mention.
constantly going.
Yeah, and the doors are opening and closing all the time, and you got the heat and the air conditioning, and of course, the lights. And then you add the glass factory to that. I recall they ceased their production at the end of March. They were around for a little bit in April, closing it, in the process of closing it down. But if you look at April of 2019, you see there we had a $10,000 or $11,000 drop from the previous year. So that's where you really start to see it more. That 79,000 down to 68,000. So I think that's had a very, very negative effect on this. It's not the end of the world. We do have other revenue streams, but at this point, I would say, barring something else of some size locating here, or an extremely harsh winter, which is certainly possible, or both of those things, it's going to be difficult to make what the projection we had for this fiscal year, which was $928,700. I think we'll see variations in this. If we are going to see, changes in the weather, you always do. It's continually changing. But as of this point in the year, we're off by about $33,000 from where we were last year in this source of revenue. Positive side, as I've talked in previous reports, monthly reports, our sales tax and our income tax, state use tax, video gaming tax, those streams of revenue have increased during the year, and we're probably going to beat the projections on all of those sources. So that'll probably more than offset this, but it's still something I wanted the council to be aware of, and it's a trend that's, permanently affected by the closing of that plant and the Kroger store and some other businesses, and our only hope of really regaining that is to see some more things open up.
Questions for Mr. Condon? Thank you very much. Mrs. Bateman?
In the month of August, we received $311,366.80 in sewer receipts. We did receive money for both the prisons of $66,363. I just want to remind everyone that coming up October, that's October, November, and December is when the water reads for the new, your new rate come January 1 goes in effect. So if you are in a high level right now and you want to change that come the new year, then watch how much you run the faucet in October, November, and December.
Questions for Ms. Bateman? And department reports either are or will be on file shortly. Moving down to new business and communications, we have the approval of preliminary engineering agreement between the City of Lincoln and Hanson Professional Services for project design work on the Fish Street Road project in an amount not to exceed $15,438.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. Discussion? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Approval of the purchase of a John Deere Gator from AHW LLC in an amount not to exceed $18,675.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff made the motion. Kathy Horn seconded. Discussion? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Moving down to announcements, a few things real quick. Nyla reminded me earlier, or she's going to send out an email as well, but there is a ribbon cut this Saturday, 9 a.m. at the courthouse lawn for the Rail Splitting Festival, and that's 9 a.m. Saturday. And then, of course, the homecoming parade is 2:30 Friday. Tracy, do you want to talk about Third Friday on that?
Sure. Third Friday, the last event of the year, is this Friday. Due to the daylight getting shorter. The committee decided to reduce it from 5 to 7. So we're going to piggyback off of the parade and some of the street closures and just get set up and go straight into Third Friday. So it will not be going until 8 o'clock this time. It'll shut down a little earlier, so come early.
Do we have other announcements? Nyla?
I was asked to remind everybody that this Saturday we are going to attempt to break a Guinness record for the most Lincoln impersonators, I guess is what we will call them, all in one place at one time. Registration for that event is going to run from 8 a.m., 8:30 Saturday morning until about 2. Then the actual gathering of the group will start at 3. To qualify, long suit coat, black vest, white shirt, bow tie, beard with no mustache, top hat, and we hope that everybody will come out. It is not gender specific, so you can be a lady and wear a beard. We're great with that, but you do have to be old enough to understand who Mr. Lincoln was, so we ask nobody under 4 and no animals.
Mr. Hoblet?
One more thing.
Oh.
Next Tuesday night, we will do your pink picture, so come with your pink shirts on.
I'd like to thank everyone who was able to attend my ribbon cutting ceremony at my law office that I had recently. I greatly appreciate your show of support and what the City of Lincoln has invested in me. And I hope to continue to do as such moving forward. Thank you.
Beth?
Just want to announce Comcast sent us another channel lineup. And I was kind of upset. I went to watch the Bears yesterday, and I got a little blurb. I couldn't get to see them. So I'll have to talk to them about that. Anyway, starting September 10th, they have Jewelry TV HD and Hallmark Drama and Hallmark Drama HD.
Yeah, that looked great. So I mentioned the ribbon cut for the Rail Splitter Festival, but it does go throughout the weekend as well, so make sure and stop out there. Any other announcements? Sorry, Kevin.
That's it. You said courthouse. It's at Postville Courthouse, correct?
Yes, Postville Courthouse. Chief?
I talked with Beth today. We approved a small bid for 2 more cameras to be added around the City Hall. There were 2. We just had 4 cameras put in to improve safety around the doorways, people coming in and out, and people. We had a kid run into the building on a bicycle earlier this year. People fall out there, so it covers us. The 2 cameras that are going to be added are going to be looking over the bays. There's a lot of people that like darting around the fire trucks and things like that. So we can catch them now and send the police after them. Also, one by the back door. It's the only door that's not covered by a camera, the one that's back there by the grill. So Beth and I sent that off today, and they should be getting started on that here in the next week or 2.
You have the total on that, too?
$1,358.88.
Do we have any other announcements? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion, Mr. Keller seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 7:29 p.m. Thank you.
This picture is the water heater.